I guess consider this as a proof of life post. It's been months since I posted anything on rants and raves, and I'm actually pretty miffed that what started out as a potential passion project has been relegated to being just something to squeeze in when the time permits. Anyway, the big reason as to why I wasn't able to attend to this is that we had the snafu at our house. You see, we built our home about 8 years back. And during that time, my wife and I were working as corporate drones. So we never really got involved in the day to day of the project. Yeah, we just trusted that our contractor was doing their job properly. Um, yeah. And we moved in right after the house was finished sometime 2015. And not long after, we noticed that there were a lot of construction faults. Many were minor ones, but they were proof of what I love to call Trabahong Pulpol. Perhaps the most major one was the seemingly untraceable leak that stained our dining area ceiling. And we never really got to enact the warranty for the construction for these faults and the poor workmanship, since our contractor went AWOL not long after. Some of the minor ones we dealt with the yearly repair work, but we put off some of the major ones as long as we could. There was also the pandemic, so we basically had to suffer in silence for the past 2 years, lest we allow unvaccinated people into our space. Unfortunately, the leak had become so bad that we decided to finally undertake the repairs as soon as possible. So after scraping what we can for the budget, we finally pulled the trigger on the project this past summer. And boy, I wasn't expecting it to be an old ordeal that would last around 5 months. First I thought we finally found a good contractor. We had the crew inspect the issues. They gave pretty logical explanations of the faults and the suggested fixes that we decided to go with them. They suspected the leak was caused by two things. One is that our outside wall was absorbing water. And number two, one of our bathrooms located above the dining area also had a leak. So basically, the work involved improving the wall and the bath area's waterproofing. And unfortunately, fixing the bathroom would require tearing down the tiles, slapping on new waterproofing compounds, and retiling the bath area. They also noticed that the leak was also damaging the adjacent room's floor. So the hardwood floor also had to get torn down and fixed. So that's plenty of work, actually. Now, thinking that we had some satisfactory explanations to the scope of work, he gladly paid the crew's down payment and let them proceed with the initial teardown. There we saw how poor the workmanship of our original contractor. Like, we had conduits running in the weirdest of spots, which, according to the workers, it created gaps in the concrete slab for water to flow through. Causing the leaks, apparently. Then suddenly, in the middle of it all, without any explanation, the construction crew that we hired just ghosted us. And they just left the house in a torn down state. So they took off the tiles, the hardwood floors, they tapped the walls. And after that, they just, ghosted us and left. We gave them a few weeks to reply, but they never did. They just pocketed our down payment. We should, in principle, have reported them to authorities for what was basically theft, but given how cumbersome extracting justice is here in the Philippines, we decided that the amount that we could recoup wasn't worth the time and effort we'd spent pursuing them. Now, moving on, we decided to engage another crew to continue the work, but it took us about a month or so to get things restarted again. Since we got burned by the previous one, we agreed to the new crew's request to just pay them daily rates instead of, what's called as a Pacquiaoan contract in local parlance. While the new crew, were able to move along with the fixes, the fact that they had very poor project management skills slowly came to light. Unlike the previous crew, who had a relatively systematic approach to work, the new ones just work on things that seemed most convenient. So they were doing this one day and they were doing another thing the other day, and they were completely unrelated tasks, and no explanation as to why, and no logic to it either. I had to regularly intervene to insist on priorities, which forced me to reorganize my daily work schedule. So Actually, wala akong nagawang trabaho the whole time that there were workers here in the house. And they also rotated one spot in their roster, and they always placed an unskilled laborer for some reason. So whatever that worker did, and it was always, Trabahong Pulpol, I insisted to be redone. And so the work just dragged on. What they initially quoted that the work would only last for about 4 weeks turned into 6 and threatened to spill into 8 even. So when I finally had it and called the crew foreman to force him to get his crew in order, they again just suddenly ghosted us the next day, leaving most of the restoration works undone. So I don't know if that's a thing with, these contractors or laborers that the moment you criticize them, you're just gonna get ghosted. By the time I was able to clean up their mess, I even noticed that the dastardly crew stole some materials and some of the tools. Again, same shit with the previous crew. We decided not to pursue them or report them to authorities. We're just hoping that karma or the afterlife punishes their evil deeds. Now, we were still able to get most of the urgent work done by just hiring, different workers to focus on select jobs. So we hired a carpenter to do the restoration works. We hired, a floor specialist to redo the hardwood floors. But still, in the end, what should have been a project that should have lasted a couple of months tops turned into 5 months. And yeah, it also burned a nice hole into our savings. And the thing is, we only wanted our house fixed, which shouldn't have been an issue if only our original contractor did their job well. And aside from that, we were just expecting, quality and honest work from people. Now, this is why I'm always fascinated, with watching videos of artisans doing their craft on YouTube. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have that equivalent of in Japanese, they call it the shokunin, the Shogun Spirit, which is the culture of artisanship in which, laborers take pride in their skills and in their work. Unfortunately, skilled and honest workers are a rarity in the Philippines these days. And even those who can be considered good ones are nowhere near the master craftspeople that, the Shogun Spirit demands. Part of the problem here is that manual labor has long been considered unglamorous and the lowest paying jobs. So, the people who are really good at it, are very few. Sure, we have, technical and vocational schools to create, these kinds of workers. And we also have TESDA. But many of the graduates of these programs that I know personally only pursued their education in hopes of going abroad. And most of them did. So even our certified laborers aren't around to serve fellow Filipinos. And to be honest, yeah, we're part of the problem too. We've long kept laborers pay low. Personally, I don't mind paying them a premium if they're really good at what they do and if they're going to solve my problem and if they're professional in how they go about their business. But it's a vicious cycle. Paano ka nga naman gaganahang magbayad kung ang lagi ng trabaho naman, ang resulta ay trabahong pulpol. So, yeah, in hindsight, we should have probably explored engaging accredited contractors. But I don't know. I do have friends who swear that even these supposed accredited contractors weren't as good as what their relatively exorbitant rates command. Mahal na nga yung babayaran mo. Hindi pa rin ganun kagaling or hindi pa rin ganun ka-assured na mahusay yung gagawin nilang trabaho. So, I know, saan ka nalalagay ngayon? Anyway, that's basically the long story of what I've been busy with for the past month. And boy, the experience just sucked.